Hello, Rachel.
Hi, Ryan.
How are you doing?
You know, I'm feeling like I'm just lost in my own mind, and I don't know if I'll ever find my way out.
Oh, that's such a shame. I would love to help you, but I'm too busy partying with my boy Lanier, whipping my dick out for some cards. I'm sorry I can't help you, Rachel. Rachel.
Yeah?
We're YumYumPodcast because of the amazing line of dialogue spoken in an episode of Star Trek Discovery, a show that we have covered in the past and will again in the future.
Unfortunately.
A line said out of nowhere by a character we know very little about in reply to being asked...
We found out their last name after they said this line.
After they said this line. They were asked a simple question. Do you want to kill this antagonist? And they replied out of nowhere in a modern prestige science fiction
out
show.
Of nowhere. It was the answer to the question.
But the reply is crazy, which is she licks her lips, sexily, might I add, flicks her hair back, and again, modern show, and says, yum yum. And we saw that. We both laughed, we both cried, we both... became born anew when we saw that moment. Forever changed, and we had to name our podcast after it. We had to make it our rating system because we want everyone to remember and know and learn about this moment of honor.
The words of Yum Yum.
And is that moment of writing, that craziness, something that is only a blemish of modern day writing, or is this something that we could see in shows of yesteryear, this level of craziness, or shows of the future? Well, I don't know, but we are rewatching Babylon 5, and that does mean we are a heavy spoiler-related podcast, so if people have not seen Babylon 5, Rachel, what do we advise?
Come back to this show after you've watched it.
We like it, we recommend it.
Yes, definitely watch this version, the 90s version of Babylon 5, because in the future... people may be listening to this and be like, oh, what about the 2020s one?
Yeah, well, and if you're in the future, could you somehow tell us in the past if Londo still whips his dick out in the new version? Because I'd like to know. And does it still make a bullwhip sound? Because I'd like to know that too. Rachel, who would have said yum yum in this episode of Star Trek Discovery? In Babylon 5, who would have said it? Silly man. Who Silly Man would have said it? I don't remember that character. His name's Londo.
I know. I have two picks.
Go on.
I have two picks. Londo being the first one.
Obvious choice.
And the serial killer.
Yeah, Mueller really had YYE, Yum Yum energy, and I could definitely see him. You know, I have another candidate. I know he's a bit of a wild card candidate, but Lanier, seeing a dancer and having a drink, and I could see him innocently, though, not sexily, innocently saying, yum yum, like confused, like he's picking up Londo's habits now, that type of thing.
But we have some other perspectives to draw on today, don't we?
Yes, we've invited some guests to join us for this discussion. We have some fellow podcasters that are coming in from all the way over in America. Will we ever have other Australian, podcaster Babylon 5 people? Are we the only Australian Babylon 5 podcast?
We've taken the continent by storm.
We own the continent of Australia. But we have some people joining us. We have our friends, Daniel and Tanya. Hello, guys.
Hello. So happy to be here. Thank you for having us.
Ecstatic.
Thank you guys for coming on. Tell us who you guys are and what's your podcast?
Well, very simply, we are a podcast that covers pop culture. We got to start during the pandemic. I was lucky enough to continue working when a lot of people were locked down. And I work with power tools. So instead of wearing headphones, earplugs, I wanted to wear headphones so I could listen to music. Once I got through all of the music, I started listening to podcasts and I realized, wow, this sounds like fun. Before the podcast, I wanted to be a musician and start this little band, and that got preempted. There was no longer any playing out, no longer any doing any gigs. So this sounded like fun. And I thought, well, what can I do? And I actually thought about doing a Babylon 5 podcast. And I thought, no, that's crazy. There's way too many episodes. You'd have to be absolutely out of your mind to do that.
It's a long-term commitment.
People keep telling us that. The Continuum Drag podcast told us that too. So many people want to start B5 podcasts, but they're afraid of just how much there is to cover.
Ambassador, I'm really not sure that this is a good idea.
Oh, nonsense. I'm perfectly happy to inconvenience myself for your benefit.
Once I got the podcast going, I thought, well, who am I going to have for my co-hosts? And I went through a couple of people, and I found Ben, who I had used to do tabletop gaming with. And I remembered he had a very good dearth of pop culture knowledge. And I just on a lark asked him to do it. He said yes. And we started going. I started messaging celebrities for films that I wanted to cover. And I started getting yeses right away. In fact, I have never gotten a no from somebody, which is really interesting. And we were very lucky. But at some point realized that two middle-aged guys talking about pop culture wasn't all that interesting. So I decided to contact an old friend of mine from college who's here today, which is Tanya.
Yes, hello.
There you go. That's who we are.
So what's the name of your podcast to refresh us all? Your ass?
We are called Popped with Daniel, Ben, and Tanya. We would have gone with Pop Podcast, but that was already used, so we're Popped.
We were lucky enough that there was only one other podcast with Yum Yum, but they were called the YumYumPodcast, and they only had one episode like 2 years ago. So I felt like we were comfortable enough to just call ourselves YumYumPodcast and no the in front of it, because we don't want to claim that we're the YumYumPodcast. We're just a YumYumPodcast. So, just your mere humble servants of Yum Yum content. We watched Quality of Mercy, the Babylon 5 episode. We already said, Rachel and I, who we voted as our Yum Yum candidates. Who do you guys think would have said Yum Yum in this episode?
Well, I am going to second your vote for Lanier. He was the first one that popped to mind because he'd never been exposed to all those, sexy body parts before. And I think it would have been out of innocence, but that was instantly who came to mind for me.
Yeah, that'd be mine as well. And it's because when the dress hits the floor, his face says yum yum.
Amazing. Yeah, so to get into a bit of a background of how I found you guys is, and this is the power of media and the internet, is I posted our episode of Yum Yum 5 of Believers into a Babylon 5 Facebook group, and that episode, that discussion, that whole thing garnered so many opinions flying around of, I hate this episode. No, I love this episode. No, fuck you. How dare you? And people just, outright saying, I don't know your podcast. I haven't listened, but you covered Believers. I hate it. And I'm like, okay, well, you don't know if we like it or not. We could hate it, but whatever. And you were one of the people in the mix, Daniel, that kind of gave a bit of your background when it came to that episode. It was very interesting and fascinating, tragic as well, but also just, you mentioned you were moving towards having some Babylon 5 content on your show, and I just went, oh, well, you got to tell me what it is. I've got to make sure to find this out, because I didn't know if you were a fellow Babylon 5 podcast, or if you are what you are, which is a pop culture one where you just discuss it in one episode and then move on to another sci-fi thing or another pop culture related thing. So then I struck a chord. I went to your page, listened to your stuff that you had at the time, and it was just crossing paths at this perfect moment, because you guys were just putting out your Babylon 5 stuff, and then there was going to be more of that. So could you tell us all a bit about your Babylon 5 kind of content that you guys have created, and also just your relationship and history with B5 as a show? I'm just curious to know that as well.
Well, to answer your first question, the show that we wanted to put together for Babylon 5 was something that I had in the works from the very beginning of this show. And it's because Babylon 5 is hands down my favorite sci-fi series of all time. And that's saying a lot, because I love Star Trek, I love Firefly, I love so many different sci-fi series. But this one just has so much to it. And I wanted to do initially 6 episodes covering one covering season 1, season 2, season 3, season 4, season 5, and then the 6th one to wrap up all of those seasons. And I realized that it was too much, especially for what we say we are, which is a pop culture podcast that essentially we change topics every episode. And I felt like we would lose listenership over that amount of time for people who really weren't there for Babylon 5. So we decided to cut it down to 2 episodes. And we were very lucky to get Julie Caitlin Brown to show up on the first one, who played Natoth. And then we were lucky to get Patricia Tallman for the second episode, which we split into 2 because Tanya and I can talk on Babylon 5 for, it appears, 4 hours at a time.
We have done it multiple times, spanning 20 years at this point? But for the recordings, lots of talking.
And the history briefly with Babylon 5 goes back to when she and I were in college. We have a mutual friend that took me to his apartment one day after classes, and we walked in and there were people wall to wall on the floor watching the TV. And he turned around and looked at me and said, "Oh, I forgot. It's Babylon 5 day." And I looked at him and said, "What? What's this?" I swear all of these people were sitting, they were rapt with attention, watching the TV, oohing and awing and freaking out with every reveal. And I was thinking to myself, what is this? I have to know. So I chased it down. To make a long story short, I bought all the VHS cassettes because that's what it was at the time. And I caught myself up and I finished watching the rest of the series from the end of season 1 to season 5. And I was hooked. And Tanya and I would sit and like binge watch these shows. She had them all on VHS, and back then we were discussing them for 4 hours at a time. So it just was almost natural that we should do an episode. And I literally brought Tanya in right before we did Babylon 5.
Yeah, I was very happy to be a part of those podcasts for sure. And for me, I was actually in Babylon 5 from the very get-go when the pilot first aired on television. Before there was a series, it was just the pilot. I still have my VHS tape that I recorded off the television of that.
Wow.
And I was like hooked from the very beginning. There was just something that was like, I need to watch this show. And gosh, it's brought me so much joy over the years. I probably burned through it at least once a year since it's come out. Just the emotional payoffs are so big. The story is so complex. I've never watched anything that's really given me quite as much joy as Babylon 5 has.
Starting tomorrow morning and for the next 2 days, I will show you the Babylon 5 that I know. You will find it a revelation of the highest order.
I don't know, Ambassador.
Oh, my good, dear friend. Trust me.
Let's talk about the quality of mercy. Which one of you are going to tell us what the DVD summary has to say about this episode? Who's taking up that mantle?
I think, Tanya, you want to do that?
Well, sure. I would love to. Okay. Episode 21, The Quality of Mercy. An alien healing machine operated by a former physician, June Lockhart, brings relief to those who could otherwise not afford treatment. Is the machine good medicine or just quackery? Either way, it's vital to the escape attempt of a psychopathic killer played by Mark Ralston. Dun, dun, dun!
It feels like Franklin wrote the first half of that summary and then Garibaldi came and let me, no. I'm fucking writing the ending of this summary. Let me tell you about this guy. He scragged my man.
Space him.
Fucking space him. He scragged my man. Rachel.
Yes.
What's been your relationship and history with the Quality of Mercy?
This is part of a blur because we powered through, I think, the last 4 episodes of season 1.
The back half of season 1 is like where all the good or solid or weird shit is hidden with the first season.
We just powered through a bunch of these episodes. So I have trouble figuring out when I'm thinking about it. I'm like, what episode of the 4 was this a part of? But rewatching this, it was such a joy. It's so smooth. It just glides between the sort of 3-4 storylines that are happening. And it just goes by so fast. It's just a very nice slide.
But in a good speed of fast, not like fast, crazy, chaotic nonsense, but like fast in terms of they've got the pacing down at this point and the structure.
Like, you don't miss anything, you don't miss any pieces of information, they don't go too fast through anything. And it does have like those moments of like slowing down,
characterization,
and speeding up, and a balance of all of the things that you want from an episode. Like, it has the character moments and the plot moments and the theme aspects and connecting to the broader narrative that it really is starting to weave.
We've come a long way since The Gathering in terms of having so much world-building, exposition, and character being dispensed to us with such ease. Like, that's one of the things I thought of when giving this a rewatch. I just sat back and just went, wow, the show's picked up so much since that first TV movie where it was a lot slower, had a harder time dispensing this naturally. Daniel, what's been your kind of dynamic with the quality of Mercy?
This is one of those episodes that I generally power through. So it's because it's later in the season, and by this point I've watched probably 4 or 5 ahead of it, and maybe 3 or 4 after it, and it just kind of gets muddled in between all of them, and I forget exactly what's going on in the episode. Now, I rewatched it, of course, before coming on here, and oh yes, it's the episode with Londo's sticky cocks, and it's the one where they introduce the alien healing device, which is foreshadowing for later. But it's, if you were to when you first mentioned it, I'm like, God, Quality of Mercy, which one was that? That's my history with this episode. It's one of those ones that just kind of falls between the cracks for me, even though I remember everything that happens in it.
Tanya, what about you? What's been your ride with this?
It's long and varied, actually. I think through the first time I ever saw the series, I remember being irritated because I'm like, I need to know what's happening, because they had set up so much. I needed the main plot of the show to be driven forward, and it felt like an interlude for me. And I was like, no, I need to get on with the good stuff. But through subsequent watchings, I definitely appreciated it more. And then watching it to prepare for this show, it really gave me a new perspective on it entirely. Just kind of the themes that it dealt with, morality and what is right versus what is easy or lawful. Just a lot of really interesting themes that were covered that I never really paid that much attention to before in any kind of in-depth sort of way.
Yeah, my history with this one, it's interesting to hear everyone's, because I've always really liked this episode. It's always stood out to me. It's always been a memorable episode. I like the sci-fi gimmick. That's one of the things I think I need to mention is I've always liked this woman has an alien healing device that drains your life and gives it to somebody else, and like the actual backstory I've always found interesting. I'm like, that's a rather complex, I haven't seen that all the time, so that's something. I like June Lockhart. I grew up watching some Lost in Space, so I recognized her, so this episode always stuck out in my memory as well. And overall, I've always just enjoyed this one. I've always had a good time. I thought it was one of the more solidly put together episodes of the first season. I thought, as you said, Rachel, it runs smoothly together. All of the ongoing plots happening in the episode, all the plots merge together beautifully. It doesn't feel like we have a plot here just for the sake of having one. Even Londo's little detouring plot has a nice little growth, and I like how they hearken it to the other plots, how it bounces off of those in a nice piece of levity to a rather dour episode as well. This one's dealing with a lot of heavy themes and a lot of complex issues. And then I rewatched this, actually a couple of years ago when I rewatched this. I sat back in my seat and I was kind of blown away that not enough B5 fans talk about how I make the case that this is maybe one of the most important and quintessential episodes of B5, because in comparison to stuff like Signs and Portents and others, this episode has a shit ton of setups and foreshadowing things and establishments of things that will be pivotal. Even the little jokes, even the little statements.
If you aren't paying attention in this episode, you will second guess a lot of things that come later.
I remember the moment for me when I rewatched it like 2 or 3 years ago where Franklin kind of brushes aside what happened to Dr. Rosen, and I'm just like, ha, that happens to you though, kind of. And then I thought about it, and I'm like, oh, I've never actually thought about that before when watching this episode. I've always just taken it like, oh yeah, tragic backstory for a guest spot character. We're used to that in B5, and we're used to that in many shows where you have a guest character played by an actor, you give them a tragic backstory so it adds to the flavor of them having more of a dimension. But here, I was like, oh, wow, no, this actually is thematically poignant to what Franklin will go through for the next few seasons. And so I really appreciate this episode when rewatching it because, yeah, I put it up there with the big game changes like Signs and Portents, but it isn't waving its flag in the air as overtly as Coming of Shadows or Signs and Portents or Chrysalis or Babylon Squared with what it's setting up. This one sets up and plants the seeds for things so subtly that you never think back on the Quality of Mercy being the episode that introduced all of these varying things that will be played off of down the road. Rachel, you and I have written down some of these kind of foreshadowing things, and I thought it would be fun if we could list some of them that we noticed from big to small.
Let's see if your list matches mine.
Oh. Well, let's start with the long one first. Londo's dicks.
That's a payoff. That's a payoff because the statues have been setting that up for the whole season.
Yeah, like that statue that he picks up at the end when he's explaining that was his penis to Linnea has been there the whole fucking time.
I remember when I was like 12 years old and I first saw this episode, I smacked my hand against my face going, of course. Like, it's been there the whole time. It's been there the whole fucking time. The statues have been there the whole time. And when he does say, what, did you think this was symbolic or whatever? I nodded being like, yeah, I fucking did. I never even thought about what these were.
No.
There's foreshadowing at the very beginning of this episode that is revealed in the episode.
Yeah.
I don't know if you caught that. It's when he's talking to it's credited as Centauri Senator, but it's Minister Verini later on.
Yeah,
right?
The same actor at least. Yeah. Which was nice.
And he says, I'll be in touch with you. And he hangs up and he says, touch these. Right? Well, we get to see these later.
And I like we do get to see more of his dicks in the episode where he has a heart attack and they have to cut open his shirt and rip it open, right. And you see they're wrapped around him. I'm like, hey, they remembered his penis.
Yes. They didn't forget.
This is a show where I could say that phrase and mean it sincerely with no sense of irony of, they even remembered his penises. 5 seasons later, they remembered his penises.
I will say, though, the one thing with the penis, remember the episode of Babylon 5 where they have the gift shop? And Wando goes and he's like, there's no anatomy. But you get this sense that they're talking about symbolically cast in a bad light.
Yeah.
But you don't know that he's talking about, his multiple appendages.
Oh, but you have to remember, because that episode comes a little later, the gift shop one. So if those keen-eyed viewers remembered, they get the extra little laugh at that joke of being like, he has multiple dicks as well. Like, or later when Via talks about how they have 6 bases.
Yes!
We have 6, you see, and each one has a different level of intimacy and pleasure. So, first you have one, and that's, and then there's two, and then by the time you get to five, it's like,
I got it.
Franklin runs secret things.
Yeah, I always kind of, when Franklin does the Underground Railroad thing, I always kind of, when I saw that, nodded along just going, yeah, that's his character. But I never thought why I thought that was his character. Then you watch Equality of Mercy, where he's just running a free clinic secretly with not telling anyone about it. And then when they confront him, he's like, yeah, it's me. Are you shocked? I'm a good man. And everyone nods their head going, yeah.
And that Ivanova is supportive of it as well.
Yeah. It's a little detail, but it is the first kind of step in showing us that Franklin has this behavioral pattern. Because at this point in the show, we know him to be a man of strong convictions, for better or for worse.
He's a healer.
But we don't know that he would do this type of thing.
No.
That he would actually run secret things to step outside the med bay and actually help others, which is neat. And that is pretty cool. It's something that you don't necessarily think of, but without this moment here, the Underground Railroad thing could fall a bit more flat because you're like, oh, Franklin? Oh, okay.
Oh, whatever. Okay, I guess he's doing that. Then we also have the death of personality.
I remember when I first watched it, I was just like, oh, that's a fucked up detail. And then the show, rarely, if ever, touched it again. And then, 2-3 seasons later, it comes back with Brad Dourif. And that Brad Dourif episode kind of expects that you've seen this episode to know what this concept is a little bit.
Also, Talia's behavior within this episode links to our understanding from her plot with Kosh.
Earlier in the season of...
She really doesn't want to do this.
Nobody wants to scan alien minds, of killers' minds. She would rather scan alien minds. There's more humanity in them, which, Jesus.
Well, we've already mentioned, but the healing device itself that comes back seasons later, and it is referred to in the meantime. They kind of bring it up as an option.
It saves Garibaldi in the start of season 2, right? When he gets shot in the back. And you think it's done. That's one of those things, right, guys? When you think of Equality and Mercy, I think that's kind of the big thing that leaps out is, this is the episode with the healing device that will save one character and, save two characters and kill one character that we all, I think, really liked. That's kind of what I think of when I think of Equality of Mercy.
I trust you'll put it to better use than I did.
Well, the first thing is to study it, find out how and why it works. And who knows, it might be able to preserve someone's life when nothing else works.
Oh, one of the things that I noticed, and I'm curious if this is something that popped up for you guys, Daniel and Tanya, was alcohol is bad for the Mbryo. This is the first time we've seen this be mentioned.
Yes, murderous rages.
That's right. Yes, violent homicidal rages.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where I was like, oh, that's a cute little detail. And then a season or two later, Linnea will bring it up again when somebody tries to offer Delenn a drink, and then this breaks me. I think this is one of the saddest payoffs in the show for me, one of them, where season 5, Londo comes to visit Delenn and Sheridan, and he's like, I've been taken over by a keeper, and I can't tell you, do you guys have any drinks? And they're like, no, we're on Minbar. They don't drink alcohol. And the look on his face of oh, fuck. And this is a piece of trivia Londo was taught in the show. Yeah. That makes it even more sad. Is back in season 1, in this episode, he laughs about it. It's oh, no, alcohol. No, that's bad. And then season 5, when he needs it, he can't have any because they don't drink. Oof. Yeah, right. Oof. One of the other big ones, of course, is the stim addiction storyline that we'll see play out with Franklin, the mentioning of this problem with Dr. Rosen and her whole background, and I want to talk about that as we go further into the episode, the parallels and the warnings of her character. But yeah, as I said, that's a big one, the stims addiction, and you just Franklin kind of brushes aside, and you don't think that will happen to him necessarily because they say it so casually, and you're Franklin's got his shit together. He's the one human character that has most of his shit together. I mean, at this point, he has inadvertently killed a child, so he doesn't have it all that together, but he's better, he's got it a bit more together than others. Oh yeah, Linnea can fight. I like that. At no point when I watch season 1 do I remember that, oh yeah, Lanier's like a badass fighter. And then when this episode happens, I'm like, oh yeah, they really wanted Bill Mumy to run around with a cape and kick people, huh?
That was some third Fane of Chidomo shit.
Yeah. Yeah, and it really harkens to just the rigor of temple training on Mimbar. Just in his 115th year, he studied 97 dialects, and then he was the Grandmaster Adept, I forget what the Master Adept of probability, and he can throw down like a mofo, like all of this just from temple. That's insane to me.
But at the beginning of the episode, he was just like, I grew up in a temple, and then I came here. That's my life. He plays it like he has no facets, and then in the episode, he just keeps bringing all of these fucking crazy facets of him being like this super badass genius.
That is great.
Yeah, one of the things that you noted down, Rachel, was this episode lets us know that Lanier is the guy who speaks a whole bunch of different languages and dialects and stuff, which we see play out in the show. Like, he's the guy that translates for a few people and situations, and
he's already learned Japanese partially.
Yes, yeah, that's true. He's already kind of picked that up rather quickly. He could read that and fix and put a bike together. And one last things is this introduces the concept of the Minbari saving face. That whole aspect that they don't lie necessarily, they save face. And I can't remember which episode it is in season 2. I think it's the one where...
Oh, they're all the honor lies.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where the payoff is just Londo knows this fact. It's just like, oh, who said they don't lie? They lie. They do this. And it's like, oh... If you didn't watch Quality of Mercy, you just have to take the word of that single episode in season 2 that Londo, for some reason, knows this piece of information.
A certain Minbari once lied to save a certain Centauri ambassador from embarrassment.
Also, from a basic storytelling perspective, these two characters are perfect to pair up because we know Lanier to be the by-the-books kind of guy, like the guy who studies, the guy who knows the scrolls, all these kind of religious things. He's intellectually aware of the world, while Londo is a guy who's out there. He's a man of the world. He's actually traveled around.
Say that with, like, when Lanier's like, oh, I have studied, and Londo's like, oh, no.
Reading is no substitution for experience. And he's right, and he takes Lanier out, and Lanier blossoms.
So many wonderful lines in this episode.
We talk about this as a big Londo thing, because it's like, remember the episode where Londo whips his dick out and cheats at cards? I think it's good to note down this is also like important for us for Lanier's journey in the show, because Lanier could have just stayed as that Mr. Spock type character where he's just like emotionally weird and kind of a nerd and like all of that, but we see him become a much more fluid and dynamic character. Daniel, what do you think about this whole Londo Lanier go out on a night on the town side of the story?
I loved this part of the story because it really did establish, it gave us a lot more about Minbari culture. It taught us about Lanier's religion and who he was as a person, because I don't think you get much about Lanier before this episode. And he's just the assistant. He doesn't look up, things like that. There's no real depth to him. And you finally get some here. But in the Londo, pairing him with Londo, JMS must have had a lot of fun just putting these characters together, because they're polar opposites.
Oh, well, he doesn't get to remember how much fun he had writing it.
Yeah. Rachel, that's your little joke of saying, let's never forget that JMS wrote this episode in such a fever flu state. He has no memory of writing this story, which is crazy, right?
Truth. The juxtaposition of these characters is perfect, and you even get more of Londo and what he's all about. But there's just that skeezy element to Londo, like that used car salesman thing, and it comes out when he's in the elevator and he puts his arm around and says, "My good dear friend, trust me." And that's all you need. That's all you need right there.
It's like a little sitcom plot. Like, these guys are going to trust me. Babylon 5's sense of humor is always something that fascinates me, because it's for a show. The show goes for so much, and it succeeds at doing those for the most part. And like, you'll have like a very serious episode. Like, I think, like, in season 5, you have the whole Centauri Prime is getting nuked back to the Stone Age and all this kind of stuff. And, like, one of the little comedy set pieces in a rather sad episode is, like, or a rather sad storyline would be, they would never dare to imprison their own prime minister. Hard cut to them imprisoning Londo in a little cell. It's like, how does a show like this manage to get away with what is very, like, sitcom, almost vaudevillian type humor? Because this entire plot's purpose is to just have fun, but also, like, yeah, there's also these little nuances, but it is in a way for the punchline of Londo used his dick to cheat at cards and the absurdity of that. I just wonder, like, what do you guys think about, like, how Babylon 5's humor works for you?
I think it's great. Well, I mean, especially to just even talking about the Londo sort of jail scene, it really takes the edges off the really serious drama and kind of lets you breathe a little bit through the episode, so you're not just on a one-note emotion, and that's satisfying.
JMS remembers that humor is actually part of life. He inserts that into the story because even when some of the darkest things are happening in our own lives, something funny will happen. And you don't get that on a lot of other shows. It's just going to be serious, hardcore drama for the entire, 30, 60 minutes you're watching. In here, you do get that levity that breaks it up, and you remember to laugh. You remember that, things are not always so serious that you can't find humor. And I think that really brings out some of the better elements of Babylon 5.
It brings out the expansive nature of the setting and the world too, because there's other things happening on the station, there's other things happening in the universe, just like there is in our real world. We're recording a podcast and talking about B5, but somewhere somebody else is ordering an ice cream and having a good time and all this kind of crazy stuff. And I like that about Babylon 5 is the station is alive. You get this real sense that there's activities happening, like, over here, this woman's operating a healing machine, and Garibaldi doesn't even know about it. The fact that Franklin found out about it first, because just that's how lived in. And then Londo and Lanier are partying, and then it card cuts to Sinclair being like, really? You guys are doing this while we're having, like, a killer is on the loose running around plot? Like,
and I really enjoy that it's not a, like, stop and look at all of these people and, like, we're going to put everybody in the same room so that we can showcase this. It's just like, no, all of these things are just happening at once.
Yeah, in tandem to one another. We got to talk about the dick thing just a bit more. I want to know what everybody's reaction was that first time when it's revealed that that's his penis that he's using, because it changes a lot. It changes the show a lot. I don't know. It changes. It's different as well. Like Star Trek, I would say this, Star Trek would never.
Is it a yum yum moment?
Oh, fuck yeah. Yum yum moment. Are you fucking kidding? We say it before, but like Star Trek would never do this. Could you imagine if there was an episode where Quark used his penises to cheat at cards? Like, you could imagine it, but they would never fucking do it. They would never fucking do it.
The closest thing that I can think of from Star Trek is when Troy's mum is kidnapped by those Ferengi.
Oh, where she's naked like for the whole episode?
No, yeah. Not that part, when he's like getting an ear job offer.
Yeah, Star Trek would be horny too. I'm not saying that. But Rachel, what was your reaction? Because you've always been talking about on the pod that you've been in a love-hate, on and off relationship when you first watched Babylon 5 when it comes to Londo. And this is one of those choices where it's just like, here's a joke for you, here's a crazy thing. I
loved it. I remember being like, what the fuck is that? And you were like, they'll tell you soon. They'll tell you soon. And you just had this massive smirk on your face. And I was just like, do I want to know what it is? And you were like, yes, you do. And you were just watching me when we watched this for the first time. Like, you were just like, you were like, I know what's coming. And you turned your whole body to look at me and watch me react.
It was a test. If you didn't like this moment, we weren't going to get married ever. if the woman that I was with could not handle Londo's penis being out and using it to cheat at cards, is that a woman I want to be with?
And loving
it. I want to see more of it. Then, yeah, I don't know. Could we be together, Rachel? I don't know. It's a real test.
Especially after seeing that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bonding experience. Just like it was for Londo and Linnea. It's a bonding experience. Daniel, what about you?
I ran the gamut on this one. I, at first, was very confused. I'm thinking, what does he have some extra appendage? What is this? What's going on here? And then it was sticky enough to grab a card. And that also got me. And I thought, okay, then they put the picture of ice water on it. And that was when I knew. And I thought, oh my God, they just showed a dick on television. How'd they get away with that? Is it getting chilly in here? And the funny thing is here's a little anecdote for you, is that I was reading the forums very recently, and people have been fan casting the reboot. And one of their fan casts was Londo, and they wanted to cast Jason Alexander from Seinfeld on as Londo. And first I thought, well, that's absolutely ridiculous. But then I thought of this scene. And then I thought, I was in the pool. Yeah. It's shrinkage. I thought, maybe that wouldn't be such a bad casting after all.
I was in the pool!
I watched this as a small, 11, 12 years old. And I was just like, oh, does he have a little creature under there? Does he have a little creature to cheat at things? Because I grew up with The Fifth Element. And in The Fifth Element, in that movie, they would have drawers open up and there would be little creatures in there to grab things. And I was like, oh, maybe, I don't know what's going on. And then once they put the picture of ice water on it, and his reaction, being a man, I was like, oh, I know what this is. Oh, I know that reaction.
I know
that reaction to cold thing, no. And I was just like, oh. And I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked. I was like, they can't be doing this. And not because it's like Star Trek wouldn't, or this is too inappropriate. I was just like, how did they think of this? I just couldn't think I even as a 12-year-old, I was thinking from a writing perspective, my analytical brain, I've always been like that. I would think as a writer, I would never, ever think of making my tragic clown man whip his dick out to cheat at cards. But that's why I am not a showrunner. That's why I'm not a showrunner.
I do love the two men on this podcast currently have the same process of realization. It just reminds me of how
it's a natural instinct.
Earlier in this week, I was talking medieval crime and punishment with one of my classes, and we were watching a video and it mentioned castration and the boys didn't visibly wince. So I was like, wait, I'm pausing. Do you know what that is? And they were like, no. And then for the rest of the episode, they were like, but they cut off their balls. It's worse than death.
Oh, yes. Tanya, what about you? I mean, you were there at the time you were there when it was dropping this episode. What was that whole thing like?
And honestly, in the beginning, I had no idea. I think I was with you where initially I thought that it was like a little animal that he had trained to help cheat at cards. And then the glass happened. And then obviously I knew it was part of him, but I didn't go to Dick. That's not where my head went until at the very end where he told Linnea. And I was like, what the heck? This is fucking crazy. But man, he's got some really dexterous appendages.
Yeah.
That's gotta be kind of weird and interesting. They've got some heavy lifting going on there with his little appendages.
There's also that moment of confusion because you're like, that looks like the feeder.
Oh yeah, the feeder had a tentacle similar to
it.
Was it the same prop? Wait.
I think it's probably the same prop.
I do know that one fact I do know about the tentacle prop from the Knuckleine feeder is they reused that prop in Buffy, the Vampire Slayer, because lots of props from Babylon 5 were transferred over to Buffy. Nagrath went to Buffy. Yeah. So I know the tentacle for that, the Grail episode did, but I've always assumed it's the same tentacle. But look, on the social media, we'll put a side by side. And you can be the judge, guys. Is this the same tentacle, or is this one,
Is this
or is this a circumcised tentacle and it's different?
Please vote on the dicks.
I've never met a person who's not liked this moment or had joy or fun reaction to it. Like, I've never met a person who's like, ew, this is bad. And I always assume there has to be somebody out there, because it's such a provocative, weird choice to throw in there. Just, here's his penis cheating at cards, and yet every person I've seen reacts to it like, oh, that's so funny.
A child reaction of like, genitals.
I'm just pleased they got away with it on network television.
Yes.
You didn't do that. You couldn't even swear. You couldn't do anything on network television back then.
Now it's a perfect time to pivot to the death sentence.
Both things are in this episode.
Capital punishment and Londo's dicks are in the same episode, and yet this isn't a fucking joke of an episode. I find that impressive. I mean, that's just an achievement on its own.
Yes. Here, Lee, goddess of passion, a synthesis of male and female centauri. Did you think these were just decorations?
I'm going to take a vow of silence concerning this entire conversation.
When it comes to the death of personality, when I first saw it, and everyone who has not listened to the show before, I had the DVD of season 1 for like 3-4 years in isolation, so I just had this, and this was the scariest concept introduced to me from Babylon 5. I thought the Psychor was scary, I thought the shadows and all that, but this really unnerved me. At the time, I couldn't put my finger on it quite, and so over the years, what unnerved me about it was, it's just a part of the world. Everyone seems pretty relaxed about it. Franklin's the most, objectionable person to this. He kind of it's the law, but is it right type of deal. But everyone this is a part of the world that they just wipe your brain and put a new personality in and use you as a little slave to run around and do good deeds. And that is what has always made me ill when it comes to this concept. And this was before having seen the follow-up with Brad Dourif, where they really delve deep into this idea even more so, which I'm always been glad that they did delve deep into it, because this is such a grim idea for world building and lore to put in there, but it always made me uneasy for that reason of everyone, even Sinclair, they just talk about it like this is another piece of administration that they have to do. The ombudsman is talking about there's these 3 options, and he lists death of personality and this is the most obvious and best option, the most practical and efficient.
It leaves us with the 3rd, because Earth isn't going to take them back. We can't keep him in the brig. So we have to do this, because he has to be punished. We only have these 3 options for sentencing. And Talia, you're stuck with this.
You're stuck with this. And so, and it's one of those sci-fi things as well, where from my sci-fi consumption perspective, I'm not as big into the 1984 dystopic, fucked up shit like this as much in my content. I watch Star Trek, where everybody's friends, and these type of things aren't just a mandatory part of the governing system of our heroes. You know?
No. Paris got to just spend time in New Zealand.
Yeah, and just Ireland in his little holodeck and all of that. That's your punishment. You get to spend time in New Haven. And just that kind of thing. Rachel, what about you? When it comes to the death of personality, I remember you weren't too impressed by it, but because you were just like, oh, this is just another thing and it probably won't come back.
Yeah, I did not. I was like, oh, they've just thrown this in because it sounds really creepy and it ups the ante for this episode. And
you could have Talia involved.
It might come back, but it might not, because it's just it feels like it stands alone enough. But on the first viewing, because you're not oh, not every single thing comes back.
And then JMS grabbed you by the shoulder and said, oh, every single thing pretty much comes back.
Trust.
Pretty much everything except for Takashima comes back.
Thankfully.
Even the coffee plant comes back.
Even Takashima's coffee plant comes back, not Takashima and her little flute. Remember her flute?
Yes. Ben, come on in.
A part of this aspect hits us in a weird way because Australia doesn't have, corporal, this, death.
Not in our lifetime.
Not in our lifetime. We don't have, you did this crime, we strap you to the electric chair or lethal injection. We don't have that in our lifetime. So this is like one of those concepts we've seen play out in media, and we, having grown up in a world where, in a country where that's just not a thing happening, we look at it as an even more strange and foreign concept, and like, how could people be so morally gross like this? Because our country has abandoned that idea. And I was curious to talk to you guys how this aspect and this side of the story plays out for you.
The death penalty it's only in certain places in our country. Certain states don't actually have a death penalty. So yeah, there are some places that I would consider enlightened in that regard. I just think that this whole issue it brings up a lot of things. It begs a question about the person, the mind, or the soul. And you guys have talked about the soul in previous episodes, Soul Hunter, and the concept being brought forth in the world building of Babylon 5. So the idea that you could be taking somebody's identity away from them, what does that strip away? Does that take away their soul? Does that take away their life? Well, they're still living, right? So you're not killing them.
Are you trapping their soul in a way as well?
And Garibaldi's weird comment also brings up that they may continue to procreate.
Yeah.
Because he says it's a thing for a positive for the gene pool, because they keep an eye on these people, but they get to live their lives over again when they get the new personality.
Yeah,
so then
it's a psychic-induced amnesia.
Yeah,
right?
And then there's those nature versus each other as well coming through.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you were to use allegory here, like amnesia versus death, I mean, if you're not going to kill somebody who has amnesia, I don't know. To me, it just feels like the actual death of the brain would be the test for death. But if you've created amnesia, they're not really dead. So is it a bad punishment? I don't know, because when you consider that the person was responsible for killing how many people?
Yeah, loads.
Yeah, you had a chorus of people.
Yeah, but he's only being sentenced for the deaths of 3 because the other ones that Talia found aren't admissible.
Yeah.
But in a way, it almost seems like a merciful end for him, a much more merciful one than he probably deserves.
We get this also just from the context of this episode, but then when Brad Dourif shows up, it shows us a more horrific angle to this as well. That makes it even more complex, because that's a debate point to have of, is death of personality a truly morally ethical or just logistically wise option to do? Is it worse to actually just kill someone, or is it better to reprogram them into being members of society that are actually positive and beneficial?
The criminal in this particular episode makes it very clear that he would rather die and go to hell than actually
he thinks he's going to heaven because he has enough of a choir.
I bet his line refers to hell.
Yeah. He's a contradiction of a man. Yeah, Tanya, what do you think about this whole side of the story, the whole death of personality and the death penalty and all of that stuff?
Oh, gosh. It's such a layered and loaded topic.
I know, right?
I mean, let's just start with, I think that just from a sane perspective, no state should have the right to execute its own citizens. Let's just leave that there. But, I will also say, I almost think that the death of personality, at least for the criminal, would be way worse than just being put to death. That would be a way more severe punishment for them, because they know that they're going to basically be doing good for society. And so it makes society feel good, because the Earth Alliance doesn't, they even say in the episode that they don't do the death penalty unless it's spacing for treason. So it makes everybody else feel good that they're not just killing this person, but the punishment could potentially be just as bad. I don't know. I mean, it's such a tricky subject, but I mean, at least from Mueller's perspective, like he would have just, rather just been shot or spaced, I'm sure.
But I mean, there's another thing to think of here is that if they mind wipe somebody and let's say 5 years down the line, evidence comes to light that they were innocent, they're still alive. You can probably reverse that. So
I don't know if you can. They
don't really establish that, do they?
They leave. One of the things I do understand is it's a device that wipes the brain, and that the telepaths are used to scan before and after to check if it worked. So I don't even know if this is like a control situation, right, where you have a personality and you can just flip it with some psychic bullshit that they have. I don't know. Like, this is one of those things where, from what I gather from the show, it seems like it's a one and done trip. But at the same time, Brad Dourif had some recovering memories of things when he was having his whole trauma with it. Like, he had some flashes of his past, so maybe you could, but one of the things that I think is very complex, it's a complex issue, I agree, and I like that it's here because it just adds another layer. One of the things that I think that makes the death of personality worrisome is it indoctrinates and conditions the world around the criminals to believe kind of that this is the only, this is a form of rehabilitation and redemption for people. The idea that these people they're incapable of change, so we shall forcibly change them with our machinery, with our psychic police, and that's kind of a tough subject in itself. There's lots of discussions about, like, is imprisonment even a good way to actually, is rehabilitation for some people even possible? All of this stuff, and yet this episode here is just laying it there casually. Like I said, even Sinclair, our morally upright commander, he's just like, this is just another piece of the job of, like, figuring out what we do here. Like, he doesn't have a moral stance in it, nor does really anyone except for Franklin, the guy who's all about, like, the right thing for the most part and, like, doing that. And he meets Mueller at the end and he doesn't seem to like him all that much, but, like, yeah, it's a fucked up situation. And for me and you, Rachel, like we said, like, yeah, you guys are in a state, and there's many states in America that don't do the death penalty, but it is a very hot button topic over there. At least it seems like it is through media that we watch that's made by America. It seems like it's a topic. Device. It's a topic that likes to be brought up time and time again, and something to explore. And I like how Babylon 5 explores it here, because you have all these characters with different fascinations on it. Like, I like that Garibaldi objects to it because of his cop-like nature. He's like, this isn't right. We should just kill him. Yeah, that's like his perspective of what justice is for criminals like him is the death penalty. And then there's others who are just like, no. We've got to have it give back to society. And Garibaldi's like, fuck no, fuck him.
Yeah, it feels odd because, like, the purpose of our justice systems, very much both in America and Australia, is to, like, put things right, and for it to be in balance with the crime that was done. But we don't see, like, two wrongs making a right, which is kind of the way that we see Garibaldi's perspective of, like, well, he murdered, so he deserves to die. Mm-hmm. But our systems say otherwise now.
One of the facets, too, that I think is interesting that got brought up a lot in this episode was money and budgets and taxes and all of that being a big motivator to push this method, too. It's just too expensive to take him back home. And you don't have enough room there, so this is the easiest option, right? Like, they restrict all the other options to this is the only option, and that thus furthers the conditioning of people thinking it's right because it's the option.
And that's kind of similar to the way that jails now have some kind of manufacturing of whatever sort that prisoners are basically forced into, of, like, we're going to get something out of having to house you.
Yeah, like, do this workshop here or do this and do this laboring thing. And it's there's a lot to sink your teeth into with this. This is just a B plot in the episode. Like, the episode is this is about the life-giving machine, right? But this is here too, and it's very tough to swallow because I don't know. What do you guys think with this episode? It has to say about this. Like, what do you think the show's trying to get at here with just this single episode?
Well, I mean, there's a parallel between the alien healing device and the thought of capital punishment. Something I was going to add earlier to what you were saying was that housing a prisoner for life is extremely expensive. That fits into your budgetary discussion there. But the parallel is that the alien healing device was used for capital punishment. So you've got two different takes on it, really. The device would actually kill people and heal others that were hurt by the crimes of the people that had done the crimes. The death of personality, the person's being mind wiped and a new personality is being put in, and they will be servicing the community that they hurt. So it's two different takes on the same thing.
Yeah, it really is. And that's the beauty of having what seems like these two disparate plots actually be much more cohesive, because they're tying them thematically together, and then eventually the two narratives converge onto one another. And that's what makes what you said so smooth about it, Rachel.
It makes it really interesting as well, because often people, as they're going through the episode, will kind of agree with the machine, but not necessarily the mind wipe, or one or the other. It's not with the people that we've watched this episode with. They're very rarely like, oh yeah, both of those are fine, both of those are acceptable. They're like, oh no, well the machine does good. And like it's a net positive, so that's okay, but the mind wipe, I don't know how I feel about that. And then through the episode, it really makes you confront that those are the same thing in their impact.
One of the things I like about B5 is how it moralizes to you, and how sometimes it just presents hard truths or hard ideas and doesn't necessarily go, and here's the exact answer we believe is correct, because
you should think this.
I walk away from this episode not necessarily thinking this episode told me that the death penalty is bad, or the death of personality is evil, or all this. Like, I get these things, obviously, but like, I don't feel like I was hammered it in, but I do walk away with just, fuck, the world can be a dark place sometimes, can't it? And there's just things like this we have to accept that just are, and there may be no real, like, we punch the bad guy in the face solution to it. Sometimes there's just going to be, in one of your states, death penalty exists, and that's just like a common thing, like that's the standard, or so on and so forth. Like, Babylon 5 presents these truths, whether they be the hard ones like this or the good ones, with just kind of this, here it is, what do you think? I don't feel as lectured to in episodes like this, like I do with, say, if Star Trek did this episode. If Star Trek did this episode, I think I would have an understanding more so of directly how the morals of the writers are for the issue at hand. But here, I walk away just thinking, the world's a scary place. This could probably happen. You know, these kind of ideas are just lingering with you after, and I don't know a solution to it. That's the thing too. It's not giving you a solution.
It's not about solving it. That's not what the show is trying to do.
A large section of the front half of the episode is people in rooms talking about why they can't do what we would consider the morally right thing, because capitalism, baby. That's the reason. Which, like, how do you guys feel about that aspect too in your sci-fi show? Because, like we say, we're big Star Trek fans, and these type of issues, like in Star Trek, that's a world without money, and yet it does have money sometimes. They don't really touch upon how sometimes the horrors of the world, or sometimes the institutions are the way they are because of just the constraints of economics and finance and budgets and all of that shit. Like, how do you feel about how Babylon 5 tackles these things?
Well, I love that Babylon 5 even goes there. That it's like one of the few sci-fi things that I've seen, well, at least for that time, that presupposes that humanity will continue to basically make the same mistakes over and over again. Because that's kind of what we've proven to ourselves since we've been here. Like, the beginning of time. Like just we do the same shit over and over, never really learning, only thinking that we're learning. And then even today, like so many of our political decisions are based upon just bureaucratic constraints, and seeing that through to the future makes perfect sense. I think that's exactly how it would be like 200 years from now.
Yeah, for me,
that's cynical of me, but I think I'm right.
Well, of course you are. For me, it adds realism to the show, and I think you made a good point there. You don't see this in other shows, and you have to work harder to suspend your disbelief when you're watching them. I don't have to work hard to suspend my disbelief when I watch Babylon 5. I mean, even when they pop to the outdated effects and all that stuff, because they've sold me so well on the world with things like this, I'm completely caught in the story, and I don't really pull out of it until it's over, and I realize, I'm back in the real world again. It's just it's a wonderful tapestry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Changing your physical location does not change your problems.
Yeah. We may go to space, but we took Marilyn Monroe and all of those people to space, but we still we still have these issues. What I take away on this rewatch is I'm confronted when I see Babylon 5 bring up the budget and bring up how we do these things because of money. I get confronted by that because it makes me think about how this applies to my everyday life and the world around me, and about how these things work because of all of these domino pieces that fall into place, that a large portion of it comes back to money, budgets, all of these legislations and rules and bureaucracy and all of that stuff. And I come to sci-fi for escapism, but Babylon 5's like, yeah, we can have escapism. Look, there's a little kung fu fight with Lanier and all of that. Isn't that fun escapism? But also, don't you want to hear about the budgetary reasons why we do this? And it does feel confronting to me. Like, I am challenged on that. And usually when we talk about B5, we're talking about being challenged by the themes of the soul, or faith, or free will, and chaos and order. But I do get personally challenged by how I interact in society when it comes to the capitalist structuring around us, and how it pushes us to do things that we feel hypocritical about. It's like we think this is morally wrong, but it's financially right.
But both of those things are part of people's lives, so both of those things are in Babylon 5.
Yeah, it adds to, again, the realism, the fleshed out nature of the world of B5. It's one of the most lived in worlds of a science fiction variety when it comes to TV, for sure. And you really you breathe it in. Like when they're in their little rooms and they're talking to the ombudsman and he's wearing his little outfit, I'm just like, yeah, that's real. I believe all of this.
There are only 3 penalties legally open to us. The first option is to send him to a prison, back to Earth.
I checked. They don't want him, and they won't pay the money to send him anywhere else.
And there isn't room in the brig for the perps we've got now, let alone putting somebody away for life.
Which leaves us only option 3. And that brings us back to you, Miss Winters.
What do you guys think of Dr. Franklin as a character and his set of convictions? Because this episode is, again, touching that topic about how he feels about medical ethics and all of that. How do you guys relate or not to Franklin? What do you guys think of him?
Well, I mean, he's definitely a stand-up man with really strong convictions. I mean, and you've seen that kind of hinted to in past episodes, and then the fact that he didn't give his Mbryo records to Earth to, come up with biological warfare or whatever. Just a really, really principled man. I really like that about him. I would say one of the things that struck me in this episode, though, was when you juxtapose Franklin versus Laura Rosin, and you see them for the first time in their little down below areas. And Franklin is very curt, like not really even looking at patients when he says, okay, you can take off your clothes now. And then Ivana says, not without dinner and flowers. But he didn't realize it was her because he wasn't even paying attention.
Yeah.
He was just factory farming his medicine, still doing good, but doing it in a way that wasn't really being a healer. Versus you look at Laura Rosin and the way like she was interacting with her patients was very kind and her energy was good and she treated them like people.
Yeah.
And
A
I
holistic
noticed that as
approach.
the very, like a totally stark difference. Even though they're both doctors, their approach was completely different. So that was something that kind of struck me as
he was doing the necessary thing. He was like, I'm doing the thing. And we get that
which
lesson.
is like the overarching theme of the whole show, which is what's necessary versus what's right.
Right. And you could argue that's his theme to explore as well in the show for his struggles with being the best doctor and saving lives and just being a healthy person.
I love Franklin because of his flaws. To me, that's what makes him so interesting as a character. You talk about him, not looking up in the beginning of Ivanova walking in. And to me, that's every doctor I've ever gone into.
Exactly.
They don't look up. They see thousands. They see thousands of patients. Well, I've got an HMO. I'm sorry. That's the way it works. But seriously, they see thousands of patients, sometimes, 20, 30, 40, 50 a day. And by that point, you're walking in. He's had a line of how many people? Well, obviously, it was shorter that day, but he's not looking up anymore. So I don't know that that's necessarily a reflection on his character. I think that's more a reflection on his profession.
Yeah.
But as far as, Laura Rosin goes, everything you said about her, I found spot on. The only issue I have is and I found her whole coming across the alien device within 3 years and basically learning how to use it, even though she says she generally understands it, then she rattles off a whole bunch of things that it does. I found that really contrived. But everything else I found worked really well there, and I did buy her as a very compassionate person who would heal people. So otherwise, on the Franklin thing, I maybe differ a little bit because I empathize with him a little more and see the flaws in his character, which ultimately sometimes become strengths later on, once he determines what they are and how to address them.
What do you guys want to hit upon when we talk about this side of the story, the whole life-giving machine and Rosen and all of that? Like, what are some things that you guys want to touch upon?
Well, I will say one thing that I've been thinking about, obviously, because she uses the machine to transfer her Lake syndrome to Mueller. And then I think, would she have done that had he not had her daughter? And of course she wouldn't.
Yeah.
Because she just would have let him kill her. But because he had hostages and she realized, oh my God, this man will never, ever stop. And she even says that, you'll never stop. And then like what she ends up having to do, transferring her syndrome, which ultimately ends up killing him. And then just more death and more, is this, she basically executed the death penalty for Earth, essentially. But she would not have done it, were it not for the people that she cared about.
And it didn't cost a single resource.
And she was cheered for it by Garibaldi and on the ombuds and all that. Like, you did a good thing.
But she has trouble dealing with it.
Because
she's just like, I've taken a life and I have to reckon with that.
That was her incident of why she's in this situation in the first place. She's a healer. She can't fathom taking a life. She's already taken a life once because of her addiction issues, and now she's taken a life again. And although it's a situation...
both are kind of accidents, because I don't think that she decided to kill him. I think she just wanted to overwhelm him and then, was just like, oh, fuck this bastard.
I don't know. June Lockhart really delivers that speech of, this is Lake syndrome. And I'm like, fuck yeah, it is. Fuck yeah. I don't know what Lake syndrome is. I don't know what it is, but she's
I don't think that gets brought up again.
No, but Stafford's does. Stafford's gets brought up again. She brings that up briefly. But, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I agree. It's a really, her side, executing him. Yeah, I haven't thought about it in those exact words, but yeah, she puts out the execution on this guy in the end, and everybody's okay with it except for her. And I think that is also what I really, really love about her character is she isn't just the two-dimensional guest spot character who's like, I killed a guy in self-defense, and then she's just like, everyone's like, you did the right thing, and she's like, oh, okay. Or
I guess I'm going back to Earth now because I've redeemed myself, so this is done now.
She actually has convictions which we've been set up in the episode, and we see her follow those to their natural, logical conclusion at the end, where she's taken a life and she feels bad about that. It doesn't betray the character we've been set up with since the beginning of the episode. It's a follow-through of that.
She shouldn't feel all right about killing somebody because she is a doctor and they take a Hippocratic oath. And the Hippocratic oath is to do no harm. And you've heard Franklin even say this throughout the series.
Yeah, and she directly says that in the episode as well.
Yeah. You know, it is a self-defense situation as well, where this guy's just going to kill the daughter and kill her and kill Franklin and just do this thing. But also,
like, is it legal? Is it right? Are those the same things?
Is there a quality of mercy that they could have taken? Rachel?
I just wanted Garibaldi to show up when his body was on the ground and say, "Can we space him now?"
Oh, I wanted Lou Welch to come up and kick his corpse and said, "That one's for me." Because
And what happened to the prisoner?
He was hurt. A PPG flashed him just before he jumped me. Looked like it went right through his arm.
this is really, I think, the device was the first big nail in the coffin for me thinking that things wouldn't be important in the show. Because I underestimated the device. I thought, oh, they're never going to use this again. And if they do, they'll use it in lines of dialogue like, oh, I'm still studying it. And maybe they'll have the thing of, could we use the device? And they say, no, we can't use it. It's like when...
Just acknowledge it.
It's like when TNG had the, oh, we wipe their memories with this thing so they don't remember us breaking the Prime Directive. And then future episodes like, the aliens, they don't, they can't take that serum anymore because it was like God serum, like it was Deus Ex Machina serum. This machine exists outside of this episode. It comes back, it saves Garibaldi, and then it eventually saves Ivanova, but takes Marcus's life. And it's one of those things where I watch it and I don't know, am I the only one where I watch this and I'm sad? I'm like, oh no, not the device. Because it kills one of my favorite characters. It kills Marcus. I'm like, no, not this fucking device. How do you feel about it, Rachel?
I'm the same. I'm like, I want Garibaldi to be saved. I want Ivanova to be saved, but I don't want it to cost Marcus.
Yeah, it also just like, how do you feel about the fact that it does come back more than once?
Yeah.
You think it's maybe just for the Garibaldi thing, right?
But it matters.
It exists.
Yeah, it's actually a part of the world, not a part of the story.
You aren't as big of a viewer of this era of TV and science fiction as all of us others are. So whenever I ask you these questions of like, were you really that surprised that it did come back? You're not as much because you're more familiar with TV shows that actually do have these payoffs in these long-term ways. So, you know, it's hard to ask you these things. But for Daniel and Tanya, how do you feel about how the machine, it does come back and like things like this? They aren't just one and dones. How are you affected by this?
Well, Babylon 5 did this a couple times with things that could have gone very MacGuffin or very Deus Ex Machina. And they towed the line and didn't go either way with them, which I thought was fantastic. This device is one of those things. They very much could have whipped this out anytime something went wrong, right? And they didn't. It was used very specifically in very certain circumstances. Same thing with the Great Machine, you know. The Great Machine with all this power, they could have used it over and over and over again, but they decided to be covert with it, only use it when they absolutely had to. So that's something I thought was really nice watching this the first time through. But you're absolutely right. Before Babylon 5, you didn't have this sort of setup. So it was unexpected. When it came along later, it's like, oh, I remember that from the previous episode. Wait, they're pulling this thing out again. That's really cool. And, you know, obviously they save Garibaldi with it. It establishes, you know, the self-sacrifice of the Sheridan character right off the bat, because he's willing to give some of his life for a guy he doesn't even know. You know, and it continues to show the sacrificing side of Franklin as well. And then, of course, later on, it's brought in for a very sad reason. Probably one of the better episodes for me as far as acting goes. I think that was Claudia Christian's tour de force episode acting-wise. Because it's such a gut punch when you lose Marcus that way.
And again, he's a self-sacrificing character too. He's somebody who's always seeking the self-sacrifice. That's a part of his characterization as well.
I think back to my initial watch through when Babylon 5 was actually airing and my relationship to this machine. And my initial thought was very similar to everyone else's. You think it's introduced, it's there. Oh, they're going to use it to heal Garibaldi, and then we'll just never see it again. And it drops out of your memory. And then in season 4, I remember watching it on TV when it aired, and Marcus going through Franklin's records. And I was like, oh my God, Marcus is going to use the alien sucky machine. And I remember panicking over it.
Yeah.
And like it was really, and you forgot that it existed, like to the point where I was amazed at myself that I even remembered that was part of the show way back, 3 years prior.
Did you think it was going to kill him though when he used it?
I didn't.
Or did you think he was just going to bring her back?
I did.
Because that was the thing.
I had a feeling, because as soon as they said this device is back, and I just went, oh no, they wouldn't bring this device back out of the blue unless it was for a big reason. And my thought process was, I remember when that moment happened, when the device came back, I actually got a little like my chin started quivering in like sadness and fear of, oh no, they're going to kill Marcus with this thing, aren't they? Because that's also the logical conclusion to his character. Like, again, for me, thinking from a writing perspective, always being analytical with these things, even for first-time viewing, I'm like, oh no, this is the logical progression of things. And of course, you wouldn't just bring it back.
It's going to escalate.
Without it escalating to where you did last time, because they already did it once with bringing somebody back with this device and the other person was fine. The logical thing would be you up the ante. And Babylon 5 is always up in the ante when they bring things back. And if they bring them back more than once, you're definitely upping the ante more and more. When I watch this episode and I see this goofy device with all these alien writings and June Lockhart's got her fingers on all these buttons, I laugh because I'm like, oh, this is going to be a thing that ruins, that absolutely devastates me later. That's how I describe it. It's like, oh, this thing's going to fuck my emotions up raw later. It's just... Yeah, and even though I've seen so much modern TV shows, I still get blown away with the fact that the little things, this device that seems like it'll be a throwaway thing, it isn't a throwaway thing. Because I, again, grew up with Star Trek, grew up with Star Wars, grew up with a lot of sci-fi TV and just normal TV where they introduce these things and then they forget about them. Like, hey, we can go to Warp 11. Yeah, it'll turn us into salamanders for an episode, but then the Doctor can fix us off screen in a minute. So it's like, why don't you just always go to Warp 11 and then get fixed? And it's like, shut up. We forgot about that. Shut up. We're not going to talk about that anymore.
I guess this whole experience has left me feeling a little overwhelmed. Flying at Warp 10, evolving into a new life form, mating, having alien offspring.
You've broken more than one record, that's for sure.
One of the last things I think we should touch upon is the parallels between Rosen and Franklin. Because I actually found that very devastating and enriching to watch on this experience. Because Franklin has always been a character I like Franklin. I like him. He's never been one of my favorites, but over the last 2 or 3 rewatches, he's always kind of went up the rungs of appreciation. And I've said this in the past where my last rewatch before this one, he was in my top 3 characters of the show. I just really appreciate him. I really liked him. And it's because of things like this where I watch this episode and I'm just struck by Dr. Rosen's story is just a warning of what Franklin's going to go down, and he doesn't even see it. And you, the audience, at least I, never factored this in. And again, multiple rewatches, and I sit back and I go, oh, right, this happens to you, Franklin. Even at the end where she's saying, I have to travel more and redeem myself, Franklin does his own version of that with his walkabout. Where he's like, I must travel, I must walk and find my redemption, my new self.
Find and face myself.
Yeah, and I get, taken aback by that whole entire thing. And Rachel, I wanted to kind of hear from you about, like, how do you feel about that? Because you've always been a little less on Franklin than me.
Yeah, but I think I was the one, after our first watch through, I pointed that out. I was just like, JMS told us from the start that this is what's going to happen to Franklin. Because before that, we also get the stems set up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we know that that's an issue, and we know that that's something that he's done before. And now we see what that can do to you, especially when you have this mentality. Because we do get the idea that, like, Rosen and Franklin had a very similar approach to medicine.
Yeah. Similar passion.
Yeah. And like, they're kind of somewhat of a god complex that they got from being a doctor as well, and how that can destroy a person.
They define themselves by it.
Yeah. And how destructive of a force it can be to try and control that much.
Yeah, and how come this is subtle in this episode? Because when I do watch it, it's not like immediately like one of those big, when you rewatch it, this is so fucking obvious. At least not in my book.
Well, a part of it is that they don't say it
as blatantly.
Yeah, they don't. It doesn't have a watch your back Garibaldi kind of ring to it. It just has the, like, yeah, that could be it. They don't go, hey, it can be really dangerous to be a doctor. You gotta take care of yourself and not take too many stins. You gotta be careful, Franklin. You don't want to fall into that trap. And he's not like, I gotta reevaluate this way that I'm living my life because I don't want to end up like that.
Yeah, you're right. She doesn't know it's not like she does the I see this in you and you have to watch out type of attitude, because we don't see it in Franklin as obviously in this moment, but we've seen it in the season, how he will throw his own safety and his own personhood away for doing the job. And we find that a noble quality because he's the Doctor. And me being a sci-fi fan, my favorite characters are the Doctor characters because they're the more morally upright ones and they have to deal with ethics in different ways to the other characters. And you just take that as the standard of the character. Yeah, Franklin has just been shot by an energy beam, but he wants to get back up and put his coat on and go save lives. But, he's a little bit weak, so he has to sit down. But then you just go, that's typical TV. But then you look back on it and you go, yeah, that's not good, is it? He needs to actually look after himself before trying to look after others. A factor I think that makes it subtle too is it's just a really well-told story about her background. It's just a really well-told story.
It's satisfying on its own. It stands on its own.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be bolstered by the fact that it comes back later. It doesn't feel like it's weak in any way or relying or leaning forward. It just stands on its own.
As we said, she has her own set of ideology and convictions, and it follows those through to the very end. And so her story, her background, it doesn't feel like it exists solely as a wink to the audience, this is going to happen to Franklin. This just feels as if this is a true nature of a character. And as B5 fans, some of the best characters can be the one-and-done characters or the minor recurring characters. We discussed it. Legacies. Introduced Naroon. He's in 5 episodes of the show, yet he has like a protagonist-level version of an arc, and yet he's only in 5 episodes. June Lockhart, 1 episode, and she's a standout. She's a good standout character. She's not one of the most memorable, but like, she is a solidly written character, and her story does not exist just to be a warning sign of Franklin. It just happens to also be that. That's what I think works so strongly about it. I'll chuck it over to you guys with this side of the Franklin, Rosen, like tying things together. How do you guys approach this stuff? Like when you rewatched this episode, did that strike you?
On the rewatch, yes. I think that, obviously when you first initially see it, you don't think anything of it because you just think it's someone's backstory. And you don't realize that Franklin is looking into the mirror at that point. But on the rewatch, you're definitely like, oh my God, it's been staring me in the face this entire time. But I will also say, I too think with Franklin, part of the reason that might be different from Rosen, I'm not really sure, with his stim issue, is that and one of you guys touched on it earlier in the podcast about how Franklin feels like he has to do everything. Like he can do it, and only he can do it better than anyone else can do it. So he has a really hard time letting go of control. That's probably his bad side, like his darker side. He needs to be in charge of everything. And that is what I think sent him ultimately down that stim rabbit hole.
I would add that there are other instances of addiction that pop up its head in the show with Garibaldi, with his alcoholism. And it makes Franklin and Garibaldi's relationship even stronger, I think, because they try to be there for each other. But even when you try, sometimes it fails. It's another great thing with B5. You can have the greatest intentions and still not be successful in helping somebody. But yeah, I think that parallel and the fact that he is looking into the mirror of his own future is really cool, especially on rewatch.
All her life, the only thing that mattered to my mother was being a doctor, a healer. She worked days, nights, weekends. But she could never keep up with it all, so she started taking stims to stay up nights, working. Pretty soon she was taking them all the time. She was addicted. She wouldn't admit it, and she wouldn't listen to anyone.
Are we ready to do the Actors Spotlight, the part of the show in which we do what?
We discuss and highlight one of the guest performances from the particular episode that we have been discussing. So we've talked about her a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided, like, even though there are lots of great guest spots in this episode.
Yeah, can we just say, shout out to all the actors in this one, like all the guest actors. They were really good. None of them let me. Mueller, he was really good. I thought June Lockhart. I thought the woman who played her daughter was really good. Really well stacked guest spot characters. Because sometimes Babylon 5, like with Legacies, falls on its face with guest spots. But this one, they didn't skimp out. Everyone was bringing their A game.
There was one character. I don't know. When she goes into Mueller's mind and they show that security guard getting shot. Okay, that guy. Come on.
Nah, he didn't really bring it.
No, don't do it.
We can talk this over.
We can talk it over. No.
I was happy he got shot.
Yeah.
I don't know. He's not.
No, he has 2 kids. Oh
no. One day away from retirement. He's not. He scragged my man.
If you don't mind my saying so, Mr. Garibaldi, you seem to be taking this very personally.
Damn straight. This guy killed 2 lurkers and scragged one of my men.
We're talking about June Lockhart.
The June Lockhart. Could you give us a rundown a bit of her career? She's she's TV's mum.
Yep.
She's the mum of TV.
Mm-hmm.
Lassie.
Yes, has 110 credits currently on IMDb. She was born in 1925. And her first credit listed on IMDb is 1938's A Christmas Carol, where she was Belinda Cratchit, and she would have been 13.
Oh, wow.
Around 13. But she's uncredited in that film. So her first, formal credit is All This in Heaven 2, which came out in 1940 when she would have been 15.
I'd have to double check, but I think I've seen that movie. That's a name I'm familiar with, at least. But that may also just because I know June Lockhart. So maybe one of those things was I know that because June Lockhart's involved. Yes. But go on. She's had a
very long career, mostly TV.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting going through, because I read through her credits in chronological order, and it's just all of these phases of that was TV at the time. She goes through a sci-fi phase and a Western phase, because it's that's what shows were.
Family phase, and she was in Petticoat Junction and
Lassie, obviously.
Lost in Space, obviously the big one. Which, just to say, we all know, and we're all sad, but also we understand that her and Bill Mumy did not share a scene together in this episode.
It weren't even on set at the same time because they filmed them at different days.
I know it would be fan servicey, but is that the biggest weakness of the episode? Because I even thought of it as a kid. Like I grew up watching some Lost in Space, and I was just like, they're gonna have them together, right? And then they don't, and you're like, oh, and she's never coming back. What the fuck? Like, how can you not do that? But again, he didn't twist the script where it didn't need to go for that sake to happen. But, it is one of those bummers where you're like, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think he pushed for it, but Straczynski didn't think that it was going to push anything forward, so he didn't include it.
He sacrificed the wants of some people for the sake of the truth and the merits of the story and script, which... Hey, that's good, but, a little part of me is just like, I
would have liked it.
They're right there.
Okay. Oh, and the other, she did a lot of theatre for television series when that was like a massive thing. And I believe that one of them was Climax, or that was at least an anthology show that she did a couple of episodes of. A film that I really liked the title of from her earlier career was Bury Me Dead. She was in a 1985 episode of Murder, She Wrote.
Was it written by JMS?
No. It was before his time.
She was in The Critic. We've already had one voice actor from The Critic. She played
and
herself.
Duckman.
Yes, and Duckman with Jason Alexander. It all ties back to Jason Alexander. He's the key to this.
Linchpin of this discussion.
Shrinkage!
She was in, I think it was a film called Sleep With Me.
Okay, did we sleep with her?
And she was in the film Troll.
Yes, she was in the first Troll, which also had Harry Potter in it. The lead character's name is Harry Potter in that movie, like 20 years before Harry Potter was created, and it's a little kid with glasses. How weird is that, huh? And guess what she played? The friendly old lady.
What?
I know. It's a shocker. She's friendly. Like, okay, so let's talk about what we know. Well, let's first say June Lockhart's amazing in this episode. I don't know if anyone disagrees. She's just great. I mean, she's warm, she's friendly, but when she gives the Lake Syndrome speech, I was, I didn't know she had it in her because I've seen her be the nice mum or grandma and everything, and she's maybe a bit kooky and funny, but like when she delivers that badass speech about like, I'm killing you basically with my disease, with my syndrome, chills come on because I'm like, when she says that's Lake Syndrome, what about, that's an actress with decades worth of experience delivering that line, and you feel how experienced she is. Like, she pulls that off with absolute ease. I mean, I'm curious of what you guys think of her in this episode, and like what your knowledge or background with her as an actress is, and if that at all impacted you when you see her in this episode.
Well, I will go first because mine is really anticlimactic. I don't hate me, people. I wasn't really familiar with June Lockhart. I never watched Lost in Space. The only reason I knew that she was in it and that she was with Bill Mumy was because of Daniel told me.
Wow.
That's it. So I don't feel bad. So that's good. At least I have a friend who also hasn't seen it. That's good. So
she was in the film. She was in the film version with Joey from Friends as the grandmother.
That was her last credit.
You've missed nothing.
Her last credit as of this recording was the new Lost in Space.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting.
Well, there goes what I had to say.
Sorry, I stole your line.
No. I actually had more than that, but
yeah. But like, so yeah, I mean, I can't speak to her, just in terms of, oh my God, I think she's amazing. She did great in this episode. I will say she made me terrified of a fictional disease.
Yes.
Entirely. So that was really like her perfect moment in that episode was that for sure. But she was great.
Well, I felt that they set up the perfect circumstances for which a doctor would kill somebody, and that is threatening her daughter. And I mean, you do that to any parent, I know my mother would do the same thing. And My mom's not even a doctor. But I thought she was very compelling. I really enjoyed her in that. I knew her from Lost in Space, and I did see her in the recent Lost in Space, but I have to be honest too, I haven't watched a whole lot of her movies throughout her career or things that she's been in. I primarily know her from that. I did see her in Magnum P.I.
Yes.
And I'll tie something back to one of your previous episodes. You guys were talking about Morgan Shepherd was the father of Mark Shepherd.
Yes.
And they had done 3 different shows and films where they were both they were the same character. The father played him older and then the son played them younger.
Mm.
Well, she did the same thing in Magnum P.I. with her daughter, Anne Lockhart. So she played the older version, and Lockhart played the younger.
That's really cute. I love when they do that cut. Like again with Will and Morgan Shepherd, and that's awesome. I like that. Well, yeah, I'm familiar with her. I Lost in Space reruns came on when I was like 9 or something, and I liked the show. And she was probably my 3rd favorite character. I was a big fan of Dr. Smith. We all are. And then I was a fan of Will, and then I was a fan of her. And I liked her because she just seems so nice and warm and loving and like the kind of mum you want in a sci-fi environment. And she just has these amazing eyes, these blue eyes that just pierce through the screen and just emanate warmth and love. I've seen some Lassie that are a little bit less familiar. I've seen her in some episodes of Petticoat Junction. I like that show. I was a big fan of Green Acres more so. And I've seen her in a couple of things. I watched The Critic. I've mentioned this before, and she does a voice on that as herself, in which she's the fake wife of the boss in that show because he's running for president. He's trying to run for president, and he's like, "I need a sweetheart that America loves," and so he marries June Lockhart to endear everyone to him. And her reason for wanting to do this was he promised to bring everybody that was lost in space, even Dr. Smith. So it's like she lives in this world where she thinks this is all real. So I love June Lockhart because she's not afraid to have a bit of fun. She's one of those actresses that I would say has more of a comedic leaning. From hearing stories from Bill Mumy, there's some interviews of him talking about Lost in Space. She seems like how she comes across, this warm, sweet, wonderful lady who really loves science. She's really into science. Goes to NASA, has gone to NASA stuff all the time, has gone to the White House and all the things many a time for all of these science things. She seems like she's really into science, but one of the things I love hearing from Bill Mumy is hearing that she's a big rock and roll fan. She's really into rock music. She loves the Beatles. She loves all of these different bands, and he was talking about like a few years ago, I get a call from June and she was at a gig. She just goes to gigs all the time, and she's
so
like,
cool.
And introducing him like, "Hey, do you have this album? I really love this." And it's like, June Lockhart seems like one of those people that you like Theodore Bickel that we talked about in TKO, where they just seem like such an endearing, amazing, advantageous, like awesome real life person that you would love to meet. They really seem like a genuine version of that warmth that they radiate off the screen. Like you just wish that you could just sit down with June Lockhart and hear her tell stories about days on the sets and stuff like that. She seems awesome. I love her. And as we record this, she's still with us. She's still around. And that was one of the things that I got a big smile out of, was at the end when she said in the episode that, the machine's giving me maybe another 20, 30 years. I just smiled and went, yeah, you're still here. June Lockhart's still with us after all of this time.
Thank you, machine.
Thank you, machine. But yeah, there are some of these people. Oh, one of the other things I found out was Cloris Leachman was originally the mother in Lassie, and June Lockhart took her place.
Yeah.
And so there's another actress who did recently pass away, but one of those other actresses that's just like, she's always been there.
Yeah.
And it's still there and like all this stuff and just amazing.
Like at 96, she's still got a credit on IMDb from like this year.
Yeah, she's still out. June Lockhart's a legend.
So,
legend.
I want to add, so I only have seen one thing of hers. I've seen her in Duckman and other things because of you, but there's only one property that I've watched independent of you that she appeared in.
Yeah.
She did one episode of Grey's Anatomy.
You love your trash.
Where she wasn't even the patient.
Is she a doctor at least?
No.
Who's got a healing device?
No. So
Right?
in the episode, it is that her friend has been intubated, even though she's meant to be on a DNR, and like her and these two other friends of this woman who's been intubated, even though like she wanted to die.
Yeah.
Are like yelling at Meredith Grey, and one of them hits her with her hair back like, "What did you do?"
No machine, she said. She did, I remember, because her daughter Alice was there with her girlfriend. She's a lesbian, the daughter. Nice girls.
Stop with the rambling, Agnes. Make your point.
I'm sorry.
What would we rate this episode? Yum being bad and Yum Yum being good. Rachel, where do you land?
Yum Yum.
Yum yum.
I'm right there with you. I don't think it's a shock. I've just really enjoyed watching this episode, and this is one too that I love talking about. Like, we've all had really fun conversation talking about. This is one of those ones where it may not blow your socks off necessarily when you think about it straight off the bat, but it's one of those ones where once you crack it open, there's actually some stuff here to talk about. So I give it a yum yum.
Yum yum.
This is worth 6 yums. One for each testicular.
Yum yum. Yum yum. Yum yum.
Tanya, yum being bad or yum yum being good?
It gets unanimous yum yums. Yes.
Yum yum.
Now that you guys have been on the podcast, do you understand yum yum?
No.
Yes.
Well,
I love it. I will say it's like many things in life. You love it. You don't understand why it works, but it's really cool.
Well,
that's where I'm at in the Yum Yum universe.
Well, let me tell you about a little show called Star Trek Discovery and a little thing called Great Writing.
Fuck off.
So there was this moment.
Just shut up. Just shut up.
You know, I didn't even have to
Right
see
now,
it.
Ryan. Time out.
Time out.
Didn't even have to see it. You've given enough explanations on this, and
Yeah.
I think I understand it without having to watch it.
But let me show it to you anyway, though.
No.
I need you to share my suffering.
No.
Or my joy.
That's just my burden, not theirs.
Fine. I'd love to hear what we'll be talking about next week on Babylon 5.
On the next Babylon 5.
Episode 22, Chrysalis. New Year's Eve in space. Sinclair makes marriage plans. Earth Force acquires a new leader. Embattled Quadrant 37 becomes the site of Narn tragedy. And Delenn begins a strange metamorphosis. It's a time of change, yet bigger changes are destined to come.
I love how cheesy that description is, but at the same time, it perfectly sums up Chrysalis.
It does.
I mean, do I need to watch it now? That was basically it.
Yeah, do we need to... Fuck, they just explained the whole entire thing. All the bells and whistles have been blown. Jeez, what's the entire point of... Well, you know what? We won't cover Chrysalis now. The DVD subscription did a good job. We give it a yum yum. And, can't wait to see Catherine Sakai in the future episodes. Wait, what? Wait, Sakai, come back. Come back, Sakai. I don't want to read a book to find out what happened to you.
No.
So thank you guys so much for coming on. It was such a pleasure. I'm so happy that we managed to get you guys to come on because, I happened chance meeting and discussion about an old Babylon 5 episode that we've already covered in the past, and I was like, we'll do Believers, and we did Believers, and I didn't expect, I'm going to meet another cool podcast that's really into Babylon 5. Like you guys said, you guys have a few episodes that people can listen to where you guys talk about your experiences with Babylon 5, some behind the scenes stuff, and as said, you got some interviews with cast members that I love. Like I love Pat Tolman, but I really like the Julie Caitlin Brown conversation because she's one of those cast members that she wasn't in the show for long, but she's one of my favorite performances in the show, and I find her to be an interesting person as well. Like I find her to be, and what she's up to and all that, and you guys talk about all of that stuff with her, and I just love her. I love her as Natoth, and I liked hearing all these behind the scenes stories and kind of giving us a new light and perspective of like what happened to Julie Caitlin Brown in this show? Like, why did she,
Life continues.
Yeah, life goes on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so, yeah, people, where can people find your stuff at and follow you at?
Well, we're on all of the major podcast. Well, I say all of them. Most of the major podcast platforms: Spotify, Apple, iTunes. But you can also go directly to our website, which is poppedpodcast.com. That wasn't taken.
There you go. so Bidley. And yeah, you guys are on Facebook. You have your Facebook page as well.
We're on the socials.
Yeah. Twitter, and you have an Instagram for this, right? As well. I'm pretty sure we follow each other on there. But I'm going to see you guys post on Facebook at least, and Twitter, I think, as well.
I try to spread it out. I find Twitter's the one that I do the least work on.
Mm-mm. We are on all of the social medias as well. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, Tumblr, all that kind of stuff. We post on there pretty regularly, always engaging with people. It's a really fun time. Love hearing your perspectives and different thoughts on Babylon 5 and what we've said, what we've discussed. You can email us with those as well at where, Rachel?
YumYumPod@gmail.com.
We also have a Patreon in which we do extra content on there. We've had 1 or 2 people newly join to the Patreon, so that's been pretty exciting. We have different tiers. If you join the Patreon, you get to be a part of a Discord server that we have in which we talk to each other on there, talk about Star Trek, movies, Babylon 5 episodes. I mean, lots of people love talking to us about B5 episodes that we haven't covered yet and letting us know what they think about it, and I have to sit there going, well, I disagree, but I'm not going to say how much so. But also, I will let you know that saying watch your back, it doesn't mean TKO is good. And so our Patreon, we talk about movies on there. We're doing the X-Men movies once a month, aren't we, Rachel?
Yes, we are.
We covered all of the Star Trek movies in existence, so we went, hey, let's do X-Men. They're fun, and we have a history with those, and we have things to say about the X-Men movies. We do what else do we do on the Patreon? We cover
the highest and lowest rated episodes of various series of Star Trek according to IMDb.
Yeah, we have a wheel, we spin randomly, and 1 week we do the best of, 1 week we do the worst of, and it's been a wild ride to go from yesterday's Enterprise to Code of Honor. It's been a wild ride to do that. I love it though, and so people, that is their Yum Yum podcast on Patreon. You can join and have fun. And
if you just want to hear us talk about things that we like, and occasionally stuff that we just want to shit on.
Have thoughts on is the best way to describe it.
We also have that show on the Patreon.
Yeah,
as well.
so yeah, check it all out. That's pretty much about it. It's been a wonderful time talking B5, as always. I love talking B5, and although Jakar was not in this episode, I mean,
we will use his traditional farewell.
Where was Jakar? Huh?
Yeah.
Was he on the toilet?
Nah, he's busy fucking.
He is. We do see him next episode, and he exits with a bunch of women. So maybe he has been literally too busy
just
fucking.
Busy orgying it up.
He's busy fucking it up real good. He loves human women. He loves testing their pleasure thresholds.
Yeah,
you know what?
He also likes to fuck Centauri women.
Yes,
too,
Londo's wives, to be specific. He's one wife at least.
Figure the geometry of that one out.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has a pouch. So that must factor in. She must kiss the pouch. But to you guys, to all of you, I have to say,
good eating to you.
Good eating to you.
Good eating.
Yum, yum.
You couldn't resist, could you?
Of course not.